couple times a year I pull out a few pub rock records and wind up going down a rabbit hole of pulling out more pub rock, and then inevitably my Dave Edmunds records come out, and then there's Nick Lowe records everywhere. Pub rock was a back to basics movement in the early 70s in England, and it was rooted in rhythm and blues and country and performed in regular clothes. The first band to really make a name for pub rock was Eggs Over Easy. They were an American band. They liked the band, the Canadian band, and it was kind of soft country rock. They flew over to England for a record deal that went south and wound up playing every Monday night at the Tally Ho in London in 1971, and it became quite a hub of activity for artists, including Nick Lowe, the greatest living Englishman, and it formed the groundwork for the movement called pub rock. And speaking of Nick Lowe, one of the most famous pub rock bands, Brinsley Schwarz, he was a member of. This is their third album. The first album was a shaky start at best. I have it. I don't think I've ever listened to it. I bought it and I have it. The second album, they were kind of finding their sound, and by the third album, this album, Nervous on the Road, and Nick Lowe wrote most of the songs for it. It's a fantastic record, as is their fourth, Silver Pistol, and Please Don't Ever Change, and then finally ending with new favorites of Brinsley Schwarz, of which, what's so funny about Peace, Love, and Understanding, the big Nick Lowe hit, this is the first time it appeared, later was on one of his solo records. Sort of easy to find. You might have to go to Discogs. They shouldn't be wildly expensive, but you're not going to find them every day in the dollar bins. And another band was Ducks Deluxe. They were a bit more of a, Brinsley Schwarz had a little more of a country flavor, and Ducks Deluxe had a little bit more rock and roll. Always a big homage to Chuck Berry with all this stuff, and a little more boogie sound. That's their first record. The second one I don't have. It's a good thing I'm doing this, because I'm figuring out where my holes are. This is their third record. I think produced by Nick Lowe. No, he was producing Dr. Feelgood. Dave Edmunds produced Ducks Deluxe. Record label put this out as a combination between the first and second record and some outtakes to try to generate sales. And as often said about pub rock artists, it seems like the mania hit in the early 70s. They were throwing these guys in the studio to make records, and a lot of time didn't capture the sound that they had in the bars. Well, this double live, what is it, Last Night of a Pub Rock Band, really does capture that sound, but the sound quality is not that great. So there you go. Another getting closer to the punk rock movement. The pub rockers were getting more hard edge. Dr. Feelgood is fantastic. This is their first album, Down by the Jetty, and a bit of a more hard R&B edge. Malpractice, second. Then they came out with a third live. The third album's a live album, Stupidity. And Wilco Johnson, the guitar player, was revered. And if you watch live tapes of him, you'll see why. And he's got a real biting, stinging, cutting sound on the Telecaster, and he was a dynamic performer. This was his last album with the Feelgoods. And then when he left, some say it kind of opened up Dr. Feelgood's sound, because it was kind of a one-trick pony in his playing. And then Guy Mayo, if I'm pronouncing that first name right, kind of was almost as good of a guitar player, but a little more diverse. So Be Seeing You is a fantastic record. It's post Wilco Johnson, as is this one. And speaking of Wilco Johnson, if you're a fan of The Who and Roger Daltrey, this came out in 2014, and I couldn't say enough about this record. It's fantastic. You should check it out. Getting closer to the edge of punk, so close, about the width of a cigarette paper. You've got Eddie and the Hot Rods, and this is like right before The Damned, I think, you know. And this is their first record, a wonderful record. Look for it. Again, shouldn't cost you a fortune, but you're not going to find it in the dollar bins. Their follow-up, this, and by the time their third record came out, panned by critics, but it was moving towards a little more anthemic, a little more hard rock, which was away from the spirit of the first two, but still equally not as good as the first and second, but worth picking up. And where does that leave us? There's 3 other pub rock groups. Rugulator, not as well known, a little more along the kind of little jam band boogie woogie sound. Chili Willy and the Hot Peppers was kind of like Brinsley Schwarz, a little more country sound. And Snakefinger, who later wound up with the Residents, and that's a whole nother video, is on this. And Kilburn and the High Roads, which gave birth to Ian Dury. And this is a country with a little more jazzy flair to it. But speaking of Dave Edmunds, who really came up at the same time as all these guys, to me was never referred to exactly as a pub rock artist because he was a little bigger than the subgenre and always referred to as Dave Edmunds. Produced a lot of people. His 4 records in the 70s on Atlantic are just essential listening. Repeat When Necessary, Twangin', this is in no order. I think Get It was the first one, Get It. And Nick Lowe was playing with him and touring in his touring band called Rockpile. Tracks on Wax. And, of course, a lot of people remember the famous Rockpile album, which was with Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds. But for my money, the best thing that I bought was this Live at Rockplast. Double live Rockpile. Just fantastic if you like rock and roll. It's, Nick Lowe sounds wonderful on it, and that's why, when you listen to it and all the great songs, one of the greatest living Englishmen. Thanks.